these economic realities have not shown up in the real estate markets in these states. So you have a state like California, which has lost 1.4 million jobs, the most it's ever lost. But yet home values and real estate prices have gone up by 12%. All right, everyone, this is Nick. I got a surprise episode for you guys today. We just got hot off the presses, new jobs numbers state by state from the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracking the economic recession and, quite simply, the economic depression that is occurring in certain states across the country. We just got the April 2021 jobs numbers by state. And guys, let me tell you, there's some crazy differences that exist in America right now. We have never seen more geographic, economic, I guess you would call it, inequality in terms of how different areas of the country are recovering from the recession. You have certain states, certain places, certain cities which have recovered. They have more jobs actually now than they did prior to COVID. But then on the other side of the equation, you have certain states which are in a full-fledged economic depression. Massive job losses, massive closures of businesses, massive amounts of people moving out of these states. And for some reason, it's getting like no attention in the mainstream press. Mainstream media, mainstream economics and financial media isn't really paying any attention to the fact that some states, very big states in the US actually, are in an economic depression. And that's going to have massive implications, right, for real estate. Huge implications for real estate going forward because economic growth, jobs, economic prosperity, that's the number one thing, right? That's the number one thing that matters in terms of stimulating local real estate demand, local real estate market appreciation. You need job growth. And so what I'm going to do in this video for you guys is I'm going to walk you state by state and show you what are the states that are on the road to recovery, that might even recovered all their jobs already and are really pushing forward. What are those states? Perhaps those are some of the states you might want to invest in from a real estate standpoint. And then I'm going to show you the other end of the spectrum. I'm going to show you the ugly states, the states with huge job losses, huge depression level reductions in economic activity. And I'm going to talk about what that's going to mean for the real estate market in those states. So this is going to be a great video for you to watch if you're a real estate investor, potential home buyer, and you're trying to figure out which part of the country you want to focus on, right? Maybe you're going to move and you're trying to figure out where you want to move, or maybe you can invest in a couple different places, but you're trying to figure out where. Well, you're going to want to watch this video because job growth data, economic data, that's one of the most fundamental important things for real estate investment security, real estate growth. You need to understand which areas are growing economically and which areas are contracting. And we're going to cover all of that and more in this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I want to get started by just saying how disappointed I am in the mainstream media, the mainstream financial press for not reporting on this topic. It seems like no one knows about it, right? It seems like no one knows that there's basically two halves to America right now. There's one half which is fairly normal, on the road to recovery, good feelings about the future. There's another half where people are frozen in place. The economy is frozen in place. It's in a depression and it's not getting out of it. You have these two halves to America right now. We're all in the same country, but there's just very different things occurring. And so a lot of the reporting is done on a national basis. When you talk about job losses and unemployment, it's done on a national basis, and I get it. But you really have to caveat that reporting with what I'm about to show you guys, because the differences are so stark and amazing that, when you look at them, you hit the floor. You're like, how are these states in the same country? And here we are with our job growth map. We're looking at all 48 continental US states on this map. And the color coding of these states references the jobs recovery since COVID. So the redder the state looks, the more jobs that have been recovered, the better the economic situation. The bluer the state looks, the worse the economic situation. And we can immediately see that there's just stark contrast between states across the country. I mean, if we zoom to Utah, Utah has actually gained jobs during COVID. Utah has more jobs today than it did in February 2020 prior to COVID. Unbelievable. Idaho, same situation. More jobs now than prior to COVID. States like Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska are down slightly on jobs, 1.6 to 2.4%, but they're pretty close to recovered. So you really have this area, kind of the plains states here to the mountain states in the middle of the country. This is the best performing area economically in the US right now. And it's really not even close. Places like Utah, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska are leading the way in economic recovery, which sounds crazy. Like you would never know that unless you looked at this data. No one would ever talk about it in the news. Hey guys, I spent a lot of time putting this content together, sharing this data with you. In return, all I ask is just please hit the like button. If you hit the like button, that shows YouTube that it's a great video. It will get me more exposure. So just hit the like button. That's all I ask in return for me giving this content out there. Additionally, just comment. I want to hear what you think. What do you think about the economic differences that are going on in the US right now? What do you think about which real estate markets are poised to have the most growth and strongest underlying economies? I want to hear what you think. And additionally, if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to the Reventure channel. I have this content 2 to 3 times per week. You're not going to want to miss out. All right, guys, let's get back to the video. The other area that's doing pretty well is the Southeast. North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas. We have like 2.5 to 3.6% job losses in these states. You know, those are definitely recessions, but those are things that all these states have dealt with before. 2 to 3% decline in jobs, that's normal for a recession. It's something that's not atypical. It's something that all these states have recovered from before, and they're going to do it again. You know, states like Texas at 3.4% decline in Arizona are also doing really, really well, relatively speaking. Now, they're doing really well compared to the blue states. The states in blue, these are the ones that are just really, really on the struggle bus right now. And none other more than New York. New York has lost 9.7% of its jobs since the start of COVID. That's 953,000. Almost 1 million jobs in New York are gone. Wrap your head around that. 1 million. 9.7%. Massachusetts is also up there at an 8% job loss. 8% jobs have been lost in Massachusetts. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Vermont, these states are all struggling as well. So you could really see the Northeast is just taking it on the chin since the start of COVID. States like Michigan and Illinois in the Midwest are also really struggling. Michigan and Illinois. And then we go to the West Coast. That's the other area of the country that's struggling. California. California has lost 8% of its jobs. 1.4 million. 1.4 million jobs in California. Gone. Nevada, 9.3% job losses. That's second to New York for second most in the US. A place like Oregon as well has also seen a lot of job losses. So it's really the West Coast, right, and the Northeast, which are leading the way in terms of job losses and economic depression. It's at this point that you as a real estate investor or a homeowner or a home buyer or whatever you're doing, maybe you're moving from one state to another, you really got to start to consider these metrics in terms of where you want to live. Because let me tell you, the longer they last, the longer these differences last, which have been going on over a year at this point, the more permanent they will become. There's tons and tons of research and evidence done on long-term unemployment. When people are unemployed for over 6 months, when businesses are shut down for over 6 months, they tend not to come back so quickly. They tend to basically stay. Maybe the people drop out of the labor force if they're a worker. Maybe the previous business owner just retires and hangs them up. They're like, it's not worth it. When things are this bad for this long in states like New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, Michigan, California, boy, it starts to become a long-term problem. So you need to really start thinking about this if you're a real estate investor or home buyer and looking at this data to inform where you want to invest in real estate. Now, we got to put these job losses in context because I think it might be hard to understand, like in the case of New York, what does 953,000 jobs lost mean? Like, that sounds pretty bad. I think we all know that sounds bad, but just how bad is it? Right? Or how bad is the 1.4 million jobs lost in California? Well, to answer this question, it's extremely helpful to look at the history of these states over previous recessions, right? And to see how hard they were hit and how they recovered. And to see what today's depression-style job losses look like in comparison. So what we're looking at on this graph is in New York State, the job gain/loss situation over the last 30 years, basically from 1991 to to 2021, current day. And this white line here is a demarcation between job gains and then job losses. And we can see here that in this period, we're covering 4 recessions. We got the COVID recession, we got the great financial crash, we got the dot-com bust, and we got the Gulf War recession. So basically 4 recessions in this period from 1991 to 2021. And we could see what New York's job losses were in each. So in the Gulf War recession, peak job losses in New York were 415,000. Early 90s. And remember, early 90s, this was a period where New York City was not what it is today. It was not a nice place in the early 90s. It was just starting to recover. So New York was like a tough place, tough economy back then. Dot-com bust, 0102. Peak job losses in New York of 233,000. All right, not too bad. Great financial crash, 0809 2010. Peak job losses of 324,000 in New York. So we can see New York's actually had like a pretty resilient economy for the most part over the last 30 years until COVID. Job losses through April 2021 in New York, data just released from the Bureau of Labor Statistics today, 953,000 jobs lost since the start of COVID in New York. Wow, that is 3 times higher than the level in the Great Financial Crash. That is over 4 times higher than the level in the dot-com bust. And that is over 2 times higher than the level in the Gulf War recession. So New York has never faced this type of economic decline before. This is new, right? So when I see all these articles online, I think I saw something on Forbes, it was talking about how New York is back. New York City is back. No, it's not. This is a depression level number. 953,000 jobs lost. It's unprecedented in New York's history. Similar thing exists in California. We can see that we're at minus 1.4 million jobs today. California has lost 1.4 million jobs since the start of COVID. The peak level prior in the Great Financial Crash was 1.1 million. 1.1 million jobs lost in California, 0809 2010. 230,000 jobs lost in California dot-com bust, 315,000 in the Gulf War recession. So California, like New York, has never experienced this type of economic contraction, likely since the Great Depression. Have these states actually experienced this type of economic contraction in terms of jobs being lost, businesses being closed? And you can add Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois. You can add those states to this same list, as in states that have not experienced these types of job losses before in a short period of time. It's just never happened. Probably just going back to like the Great Depression in the last 80, 90 years, this hasn't happened in any of these states. So they're in full-fledged economic depressions, and the recoveries are just not occurring. The recoveries are slow. They're muted. There's some job gains every couple months, and then it just flatlines for the next couple months. And so they're in a really tough shape economically right now. The interesting thing, however, is that these economic realities have not shown up in the real estate markets in these states. So you have a state like California, which has lost 1.4 million jobs, the most it's ever lost. But yet home values and real estate prices have gone up by 12% year over year, according to Zillow. So we have 1.4 million job losses over here, and we have 12% increase in real estate prices over here. How does that make any sense? Same thing in New York. New York, we've lost almost 1 million jobs, and we have 9% increases in real estate values over the last year. So we have these states which are facing the harshest economic realities they have ever faced, but yet real estate prices are still going up. And this really has to concern you as a real estate investor. That's got to be of real concern, because it's as if the economic realities are just being hidden. They're not being felt, right? And at some point they will. You can't just explain away 1.4 million jobs gone or 1 million jobs gone. I'm sorry, you can't. The fundamental economic drivers of real estate are jobs, right? Jobs determine real estate demand. And I think really you're seeing the combination of fiscal stimulus, unemployment assistance, eviction moratorium, foreclosure moratorium. These four things, that's what's really shielding states like California, New York, Massachusetts from feeling the economic realities in the real estate market, right? Because if landlords can't evict and mortgage bankers can't foreclose, then people are just getting a free ride, right, in terms of real estate, especially if they're getting extended unemployment assistance. With all the government money coming into these states that have gotten hit hard, the real estate markets are almost acting like things are normal. But of course, we know things are not normal at all in these states. And I'd be really concerned if I owned real estate in any of these states. And I'd be really concerned if I was looking to buy real estate in any of these states. Because you can only push it off for so long. As Warren Buffett says, when the tide recedes, when the tide of fiscal stimulus and the moratoriums recede, we're going to see who's swimming naked. We're going to see which states are swimming naked in terms of their real estate market and expect to see those real estate prices correct to what the economic fundamentals are. Now, I think an interesting question for real estate investors and home buyers, right, or anyone who's interested in economics, is why is this occurring? Why are some states doing so poorly economically coming out of COVID? And why are other states, the Utah, the Idaho, the Montanas, the Texas of the world, why are they doing so well, comparatively speaking? What is driving these differences? What is driving the differences between these states? And actually, when you look at the data, there's actually a very simple explanation that explains a lot of these differences. And it's quite simply how Republican or Democrat the state is, how conservative or liberal it is. Like that metric, if you look at how these states have voted in the previous 4 elections, Republican versus Democrat, that explains most of the difference in how they're recovering from COVID. States that have voted more red, more Republican, are doing much better than states that voted blue, more liberal. They're doing much better in terms of economic recovery. And you can see what I'm talking about on this graph where we're looking at state by state, the percentage of the vote that went to the Democratic presidential candidate in the last 4 elections on average. So we're getting a really long run perspective, 12-year perspective on the politics in these states. And what we're seeing is just that the political leanings in the voting is explaining, according to this trend line, almost half of the variation in economic recovery. So just take a look at this. Like we have New York over here, voted 60% Democrat last 4 elections. Massachusetts, 62. California, 62. Vermont, 64. Rhode Island, 60%. So these are the most liberal states in America. These are the most liberal states in America, and they also happen to have lost the most jobs over the last year, right? We have New York at 9.7% loss, Massachusetts and California at 8% loss, Rhode Island at 8%, Vermont at 7.3%. So these exceedingly liberal states have an exceeding number of job losses. Let's flip to the other side. Utah voted 32% Democrat. Idaho, 32% Democrat. Arkansas, 36% Democrat. Oklahoma, 32% Democrat. These are the most conservative states in the country. And what do we notice? Much better jobs recoveries from the COVID recession. So why is this? Why are the conservative states doing better than the liberal states? And I think the first obvious answer is COVID policy, right? The more conservative states had much more of an open response to COVID, didn't shut down as many businesses, didn't have as many statewide requirements, and as a result, most likely, their economies are doing better as well. However, there's a longer-term trend at play here as well, where the more conservative states often have more business-friendly policies, less onerous taxes, less onerous regulation system, which even before COVID was attracting migration. It was attracting business relocations. You saw a lot of companies moving from states like New York to states like Tennessee and Texas, or California to Texas. You saw a lot of that even before COVID, and like what COVID did with so many other things, right? It just accelerated the trend. It accelerated the existing trends. So there's both a short-term and a long-term explanation here. The short-term is that Republican governors, people in Republican states, did not react as harshly to COVID. They still kept living their lives mostly as normal. As a result, the economy didn't suffer as much. But really the long-term thing is these states had much better economic systems, lower taxes, less business regulation, which was already attracting people and businesses prior to COVID. And then I think when COVID happened, many of those people and businesses said, all right, I was waiting to make this decision to move from New York to Texas or New York to Tennessee, but now I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to do it. So I think that's what you saw. And I think the question that real estate investors need to ask themselves, or home buyers, or if you're trying to figure out where you want to move, you need to ask yourself, like, do I see this continuing, right? And do I want to be in a state with more freedom, more pro-business, more growth, or do I want to be in a state with more restriction, less growth? More of in this case, an economic depression in April, May 2021. Where do I want to be? Now, I think the answer to that's kind of obvious. You'd rather be in the state with more freedom and growth. But there's one other thing you need to consider, right, as a real estate investor. Like, on one hand, we have demand, which is like job growth, migration. That's great for real estate. But supply is the other side to this equation. And there's this interesting duality where red states, they're actually really good about allowing new housing to be built. It's very easy to build in red states, especially a state like Texas. It's very easy to build. And that's good for society because more units get built. And for all those people coming, like, the unit is there for them to live in, and that keeps real estate affordable. Compared to a place like California or New York, where if you want to permit, a new development, you want to build a new house, or you want to get like a zoning variance, forget about it. It's like years and years and years. And basically, it's much harder to build new supply in these more liberal states. That's bad for society, of course, but it's actually kind of good for real estate investors in those states because there's no supply competition. So this is something you do need to weigh, right? The cost benefit of being in a more free, conservative state is, yeah, you're probably going to get more growth, but you're also probably going to get more supply competition as a real estate owner or a homeowner. There's going to be more new product coming up around you. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I think it's really important. It's fundamentally important that you are on top of this data, this real-time data that comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on jobs and the economic progress of different regions and states across the country. This is ultimately what's going to drive real estate values in the long run. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to post this every single month. When there's new updated employment figures by state, I'm going to post this every month so you guys can see what they're looking like. If you guys want more of this content on a regular basis, if you want to see more data on real estate and the economy more than the 2 or 3 times a week I post on YouTube, then make sure to follow me on Instagram. I have an Instagram account. It's @reventure_consulting. @reventure_consulting. I post a new chart, graph, map every single day on real estate across the country, and I post stories of me explaining what the data means. It's a very interactive experience. You can message me on there. So follow me on Instagram @reventure_consulting. Additionally, if you enjoyed the content in this video, please just make sure to hit the like button. I spend a lot of time putting this data together for you guys. I love sharing it. In return, just hit the like button. If you could do that for me, that would be great. Hitting the like button, that gives me a little more exposure on YouTube, tells YouTube it's a good video. Additionally, make sure to comment. I want to hear what you have to say about all of this. What do you think about the economic differences going on in the US right now? What do you think about which markets that you want to invest in or where you live? Let me know what you think, and also make sure to subscribe. We have at least 2 videos come out every week. This week we have 3. I post this content on a recurring basis. On Sunday, I'm going to do a video on the myth of the US housing shortage. You've probably heard a lot about how mainstream media is saying that there's a huge shortage of US housing and that's why prices are going up so much. I'm going to post on Sunday why that's not true using data. I'm going to show you guys why that's not true. So if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe and make sure to check out my video on Sunday. All right, guys, it was great talking to you. Until next time, this is Nick from Reventure Consulting signing off.